ILDS, the International League of Dermatological Societies, and this is the official sponsor, if you will, of the World Congress of Dermatology. So this is a very special week for us in dermatology because we are here at the world's largest and oldest gathering of dermatologists. This is the 24th edition of the World Congress of Dermatology, which has been convened continuously for 130 years now. So within this special week, today is a special day. So today, Thursday, June 13th, represents International Albinism Awareness Day. And this is a very important day for us, and we are marking and observing this day with a special announcement that you'll hear about in a few minutes. The first International Albinism Awareness Day was actually observed and recognized by the World Congress of Dermatology as well. So 4 years ago in Vancouver, for the very first International Albinism Awareness Day, we celebrated and marked that with an announcement and presentations and also a press conference. So today you're going to be hearing some stories, but also problems and solutions about how we're going to care for patients with albinism. So here on the front desk here, we have some people who will be telling you these stories and telling you about some special projects and solutions that we've worked together on. But from the point of view of the ILDS, our organization is dedicated to humanitarian dermatology, amongst other things. And one of the key projects that we have been really proud to work on is the special book that you'll hear about in a few minutes. So it's really a pleasure on behalf of the International League of Dermatological Societies, our 190 members, and more than 200,000 dermatologists around the world to be celebrating International Albinism Awareness Day and to be marking this landmark moment with something really exciting. So first, I want to invite Jamie Walling, who is with Standing Voice. He's the program manager for Standing Voice, and Standing Voice is a leading human rights charity that empowers people with albinism in Africa. So I'll turn it over to you, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Harvey. Yes, and thanks for everyone attending today. And as has been said, this is a very special day in the movement for everyone involved in defending the rights of people with albinism, as it is, of course, International Albinism Awareness Day. And by way of introduction, my name's Jamie Walling, and Programs Manager for Standing Voice, as we've said. We are a leading human rights charity empowering people with albinism who face extreme abuse and discrimination across Africa. It's a cause that we passionately believe in defending those rights, and it's something that we've been involved with for some time. We have a range of programs which covers health, education, advocacy, and community development initiatives. But our flagship is our skin cancer prevention program. And that was proudly established in collaboration with the RDTC in 2013. And today the program provides comprehensive outreach dermatological care to people with albinism across Tanzania and Malawi. And this service is delivered close to patients' homes every 6 months. And in locations where the service has been delivered the longest, we've reduced instances of skin cancer by as much as 85%. So it's quite an impactful program that we're very, very proud of. There's a huge emphasis on clinical capacity development within the program. We invest substantially in the continual training for the clinicians who are leading frontline service delivery. And it's in support of this endeavour that the Manual of Best Practice was produced. It will be a life-saving resource, and it's something we're incredibly proud to have realised alongside our wonderful partners who are sat here with me today. I'll leave Dr. Andrew Sharp to talk more detail about the manual itself, but I'd just like to take this opportunity to say a number of thank yous. Firstly, I'd like to thank Dr. Claire Fuller, with whom we spoke about this concept many, many years ago. And I'd like to thank her for her belief in us to deliver this project and realise it. And also thanks to the IFD and the ILDS, everyone that organisation has been wonderful in support of this project. Huge thanks to the authors, some of who are sat next to me, who wrote freely and voluntarily for this manual, which was a huge contribution. Special mention does have to go to Dr. Andrew Sharp, who sat next to me, for his considerable contributions in the authorship and in the editing. Thanks also to the clinicians in Tanzania and Malawi who have provided feedback. So they've been working with the manual for the last year and a bit and constantly been involved in the development and the refinement. Obviously, it needs to be very discernible to local contexts and local needs. So it's been very, very key that we've got these programs on the ground that we can actually test this application. And also thanks to our patients who provide continual inspiration for our work day in and day out, with whom none of this would exist. And finally, I'd like to thank Novartis and PFAB Foundation for sponsoring this wonderful, wonderful resource. So I'd like to hand over to Andrew now to say a few words.
Good, thanks very much, Jamie. Okay, I just want to say a few words about the development of the manual, and in particular the collaborative effort involved, and the participation of the clinicians that work with people with albinism in the field in Sub-Saharan Africa, and particularly in Tanzania and Malawi. So we wanted to understand their learning needs before we got too far with the manual. And so we assessed their range and depth of knowledge by four means. Firstly, questionnaires. Questionnaires on dermatology and dermatosurgery relating to management of albinism. And secondly, by interactive practical workshops using artificial skin models. Some of those we've taught carry out cesarean sections and other emergency abdominal operations. But for some of them, the skin is just a barrier to get through quickly to save a life. And so we found there was a great need for learning in dermatosurgery. We want our patients to be advocates to other people with albinism. So when they have surgery, first we want the tumor to be properly removed, and secondly we want the scars to be good, so that they can be advocates to other people with albinism who may be fearful of having surgery. So that's a very important part of managing albinism. And thirdly, we also assess the learning needs by interaction in clinics. We might see 100 people with albinism in a day. And bear in mind that skin cancer is not common in the normally pigmented African populations, and so many clinicians there don't see very many BCCs and SCCs or other rarer tumors. Then fourthly, we had operative sessions after the clinic days when we were able to identify what should be emphasized in the manual. So we then asked the clinicians to provide structured feedback on the draft manual. We made changes, and then we went through another feedback on the manual. Our principal contributors are very experienced in their area of interest and expertise in their home countries, but all have volunteered in remoter regions of Tanzania and Malawi, for example, and so are really writing from an understanding of local constraints and conditions. For example, there may not be a dermatoscope, there may be no marker pen, there may be no fine cutting needles, topical treatments, 5-FU, imiquimod, may be difficult to obtain, lignocaine and adrenaline for surgery may have to be pre-mixed. Incidentally, I have in this box, if anyone's interested afterwards, homemade sutures. So if you want to see how to make homemade sutures in the bush, then come and see me afterwards. So the manual is currently bound in paper form, but we hope to develop it for use in electronic form and for it to be part of a larger manual with other topics such as eye care. It has sections and chapters which can stand alone, and of course further additions can be built on with feedback. And so finally, we envisaged three types of users. Firstly, government and charitable organisations as best practice for setting up and running skin surveillance clinics in low-resource settings. Secondly, clinicians, whether clinical officers, community dermatologists, doctors with or without postgraduate qualifications, to guide and remind them on essentials of medical and surgical management. And thirdly, as for clinical trainers, as a guide for a teaching curriculum in care of people with albinism. Yes, thank you very much, and thanks for your interest.
Okay, thank you very much, Jamie and Andrew. This beautiful book is richly illustrated, and I think in the years to come, it is going to become, one of the classics for albinism, not only for Sub-Saharan Africa, but I believe that the quality of the information available in this book is applicable to anyone with albinism anywhere in the world. So one of the key partners in producing this publication was is the IFD, and so I want to invite Claire Fuller, the chair of the International Foundation of Dermatology, to give us some further perspectives on this wonderful, beautiful manual of best practices.
Thank you, Harvey. I'll do that. Does that work?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a really, really special day, the day that we actually launch this manual. It's been a dream in progress and production, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be sitting here talking about it and presenting it and launching it. So to take you all back to how this started, we've been talking about the RDTC, and that's the Regional Dermatology Training Center in Moshi, Tanzania, which is one of the flagship educational institutions for the International Foundation for Dermatology and the ILDS. And back in 1994, a couple of volunteers who were working there, Donald Lookingbill and Barbara Leppard, published the first experience of documenting the increased risk and load of skin cancer and pre-skin cancer in very young patients with albinism, developing skin cancer, which was fatal in very young people, killing them early in Africa. And it was this that drove them to set up and establish the Kilimanjaro PWA program, Persons with Albinism program, in skin cancer prevention. And that has flourished and grown gradually over the years, reaching out to a number of areas around the Kilimanjaro region. And in 2013, we recognized we wanted to get bigger than that. We wanted to reach everybody in Tanzania. We wanted to reach everybody in Sub-Saharan Africa who has albinism. We're aware that it's much more common in certain parts of the world, and it's particularly common in Sub-Saharan Africa. So we developed the PWA, the Persons with Albinism Working Group, which was had a number of stakeholders. We were multinational, international, multi-professional, involving clinicians, infrastructure NGOs, human rights NGOs, obviously, that Standing Voice is such a good example of and has been an amazing partner to work with, pharmacists, and, of course, our patients. And we started to work on what the priorities were, and I was just looking this morning back at our aspirations back then. It was a sort of working document, and one of them was about how to increase education and improve standards, and the manual was, the twinkle in our eye of the manual was born at that time. So it's taken some time to produce this, and I'm so grateful for our partners and the rigor of people like Andrew, people like Jamie, and the other contributors for taking this on. Obviously, I've been working very closely with my colleague, Dr. Daudi Mavura, who's the principal of the Regional Dermatology Training Center on my far right, and he may mention a couple of things more. But I do think it's absolutely wonderful that now these enormous clinics, and you heard Andrew mentioning 100 patients a day. You know, I was sitting on the stand earlier, and people coming past say, oh, I see about 1 or 2 people with albinism in my career or in a year. This is a completely different league of clinical need in Africa. And this is a 156-page practical manual. It's really, really practical and useful. And we anticipate that although it's been written with Africa in mind, because that's where the experience has come from, it'll be totally applicable to other areas of the world. And I'm delighted that Carolina Macron has joined us from Brazil in the front row here, who was just awarded the L'Oreal Social Responsibility for Dermatology Award at the launch of this meeting. And she's establishing a program in Brazil, and we look forward to working with her, and perhaps she might road test this manual and see how applicable it would be there. And equally, we're aware we've established a training program in Fiji, where there's lots of people with albinism, and we anticipate that this could also roll out to Fiji. So we hope this will be a truly international document. It will, as we've heard, it's the first edition, and we anticipate building on how we distribute it, how we develop it, how we refine it. And we also hope to add to it with these other aspects of care programs so that it's truly comprehensive and it doesn't just deal with skin cancer prevention, but also eye care that inhibits the access of these patients to education and social integration. So it's really, really important to have all of these various aspects. And we anticipate some different chapters in this manual of good practice. So I'll hand on to Daudi Mavura, the principal of the Regional Dermatology Training Centre, who is the clinical lead of this programme, has been a tower of strength and energy and local know-how. And if Daudi can't get something done in Tanzania, you can't get it done. So I hand you over to him.
Thank you very much, Claire. I'm very pleased to be here, and I'll just let you know that Tanzania today, they're celebrating this International Albino Awareness Days, and the vice principal, the vice president is attending, is a guest of honor. So my colleagues have covered most of what I would like to say, because I've been part and parcel of developing this manual. But one thing which is good about this is now we have guidelines to teach our clinical officers who are attending the course in Moshi. So we have already opened the way, and we will be following the guideline, the principle of treating skin cancers, which was not there before. So on behalf of RDTC management, I would like to thank sincerely Standing Voice for the cooperation they're giving us, and IFD for all the support that they're giving us. Thank you very much, and have a good opening of the mic.
Okay, great. So just before we open for questions, I wanted to just give a comment that when I became president of the ILDS 4 years ago, this idea of a manual kind of came forward, and it was just an idea. And I'm just so glad and pleased that on the second last day before I complete my term, I've been able to hold this in my hand. But right next to me, this gentleman is Lars French, who is the president-elect of the ILDS, and I think he wants to give us some perspectives on ILDS and what happens next with albinism.
Thank you very much, Harvey. For me, it was an eye-opener when I visited Tanzania and Moshi and the Regional Dermatology Training Center 2 years ago to see the suffering of these patients on one side, and also how well they are taken care of by the team at the Regional Dermatology Training Center in Moshi. And I think this manual is fantastic because it will help you teach more people how to treat these patients and bring a preventive management to these patients around your country, but not only. This will be a useful tool around the world for people confronted with taking care and helping these underprivileged patients with albinism in the future. And I'd like to say, as incoming president, that from the side of the ILDS, we're really committed to supporting our humanitarian activity on one side by working very closely with the RDTC, but also in supporting this initiative of people, the PWA and people with albinism. Thank you very much.
Great. So I'd be happy to take any questions from anyone if they have questions for anyone here on the panel for today? No? Yes, please.
Maybe a very practical question, but you said it's going to be useful for everybody in Africa. And do you plan to translate the manual, maybe in other languages, or French for the rest of the Africa?
So yes, that's my job for the second half of this year. is to, by the end of this year, we'll have it in French and English. I mean, yeah, as Claire said, you know, although it's obviously the experience has been in Africa, that's we're writing from that perspective, but it's very, very applicable, you know, in terms of the actual clinical management to many low resource settings like anywhere in the world. So, you know, we're really passionate about this resource, and we really believe it can have a huge global impact. So, you know, languages are a small barrier to ensuring access to this resource all over the world. So, yeah, we will be seeing it in multiple languages.
I've just perhaps come into that as well to say that, I mean, it's so amazing that we've already evaluated the intervention and demonstrated this reduction in skin cancer by 85%. I think that is absolutely amazing. And as we have already got a track record in translating our initiatives. So, for example, Community Skin Health, which is our educational journal, we are now translating into French. We anticipate it going into French and Spanish. We've had requests to go into a Chinese language and Arabic. And we also hope to translate it into Portuguese to make it relevant for the African continent. So you're quite right. For the African continent, we really do need to think about French and Portuguese. Those would be our sort of priorities for this. And it certainly won't be a barrier to access. And whilst that's a resource issue, we will find it.
Yes, question here.
Thank you very much for this very nice initiation. And I just want to ask about if you have any further projects or financial support or something like this, or for instance, sunscreens or operations or something like this. Because sometimes in Africa and even these developing countries, one of the big obstacles is the financial issue. So I don't know if you have any.
Yeah. Well, we're glad you asked.
Yeah, I can answer that. So we're actively exploring replication of the program into other African countries. In 2016, I was involved in a pilot in Malawi, and we've now developed that program fully in Malawi. So we now have the whole comprehensive package of care, which includes sunscreen, health education, hats, literature, as well as all the clinical stuff. Also, like a big thing about this program as well is, in fact, making people understand albinism, quite frankly, like the scientific origins. There's lots of myths and superstitions about albinism, and it's very much a social issue as much as it is a medical and clinical issue. So the program is quite comprehensive in that. And so we are in Malawi as well, and I was in Burkina Faso in last year exploring options there, and I'm going to Zimbabwe later this year. But the program is a comprehensive package. It doesn't work if you don't have all of these elements, and it's very well managed and resourced. So in terms of support, it would only work in that context, really. Like we're not in a position to be just funding random surgeries and all of this sort of stuff. For us, that's not really going to be a sustainable investment for us to see lasting impact and lasting change in the same way that we've seen in Tanzania. So, you know, it's our ambition to see this care all over the African continent and beyond, quite frankly. But, you know, it takes time, these things.
And just speaking into the availability of the sunscreen, you're absolutely right. That is a big challenge. And the way that the Tanzanians have approached this is to locally produce a formulation of sunscreen that the patients chose. So they were involved in the development of it. So it's low cost. It's compounded at the Kilimanjaro Sunscreen Production Unit and is called KiliSun, and is available and distributed as part of this comprehensive care program, which includes the education, the how to put it on, the provision of the cream, and then they do the twiddly bits at the end, which is the what the manual will deal with. But it's the bit all beforehand that's really, really crucial. And each country we roll out to, or they roll out to, the delivery of the sunscreen and the provision of that will depend on the local environment. So, for example, in Kenya, there may be some procurement of a sunscreen, but we found in Tanzania that it's the locally available product that is preferred by the patients. They've chosen it. It's much heavier than a Western prepared product. It's a slightly different formulation and consistency. That is something that we would really like to explore replicating, and that's actively being pursued by one of the PWA working group. So there is a pharmacist who is involved in doing that and taking that side forward, and she's super dynamic, and we anticipate that that will succeed too.
Okay, do we have any additional questions? All right, so I think I'll close this press conference by saying thank you and congratulations. So congratulations to Standing Voice, to the IFD, to the RDDC, to all the people that have been working on this specific project, but more importantly to all the people who care, and including yourselves. I mean, by being here to come and listen to this story, to share some of your time at this very, very busy meeting means something. It means you care, and that's where we have to start from, because if you don't care, then nothing else can happen afterwards. So thank you very much, and we hope you have a wonderful continued experience here at the world's oldest and largest global international dermatology conference. Thank you.